one of those that are represented. So as a little bit of background, the Utah Lake Authority basically is responsible for management of the lake area, including essentially zoning authority. And they also are tasked with working with the state and federal agencies regarding the management of the land, basically the lake bed, as well as all the federal or state land that's where that dividing line is between private property and government owned land. So
Right.
it's a very significant responsibility.
No, it's a very significant, and it's much more proactive than it ever has been. And this commission is basically LaNae would be our voice, our representation for Orem on that commission. So it's something we take very seriously.
You ready to make a motion?
Sure. Would you like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion. I think Councilmember Millett would be an excellent representative on that commission. I would like to move that we appoint LaNae Millett to serve on the Utah Lake Authority.
Second.
We'll start down here.
Aye.
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 The resolution passes. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Well, are we close?
So I just sent a link to Representative Jetman, so she should be jumping back.
Okay, and Representative Stratton's. Okay, and we're in a snowstorm outside, right?
Senator Grover on?
I have not seen him come on. He was only in meeting.
Curtis
Had a conflict and was going to try to make it work.
Curtis Bramble, he had a situation in his family. He couldn't come on tonight. No, I mean, yeah, there's nothing we need to go over on that. Does anybody want to tell a joke?
I usually have good dad jokes at the spur of the moment, but nothing's coming to mind.
Yeah, really. So is Representative Judkins on there?
It's just said thanks, so I think she's logging in.
Okay,
We haven't seen her pop up yet.
because we can start as soon as we have one of them.
Mayor and council, Brandon can just touch quickly on the monthly financial statement item that's on the item 10.1 on your agenda. I just thought it might be, since we have some time, I thought it might be a good idea just particularly for Councilmember Gale and Councilmember Kilpack, but just to give an idea of that the financial summary that you see. So the concept of that summary is to give you an idea as far as each of the funds that are of significance to the city, and giving you an idea of the revenues associated with those funds as well as the expenditures and how those relate as far as a percentage of the budgeted amount. And then on the far right side of that report, you see what the prior year was for that date, so that you have some kind of a comparison of where were we, in the prior year as compared to the current year, just to give you some kind of idea of where we sit currently. Obviously, you can look at those revenues and look at the expenditures and kind of have an idea of where we are as far as positive or negative in that particular fund at the current time of that report. So just to kind of give you an outline of what that report is, it's obviously meant to be a very quick look and not a lot of detail in there per se for that. And we didn't want to necessarily list every single fund because we have a lot of them. And so I didn't want to necessarily bury anybody in a bunch of numbers and percentages either. So just to give you an idea, obviously, if you look at that report and there are any questions about any of those particular funds or the information presented there, you're welcome to contact me and I can try to explain any try to answer those questions. So, okay.
Thank you, Brandon.
We are good to go now, I think, right?
Representative Debbie's on the interest. Oh, that looks like Stratton also decided to do the Zoom. Good.
Pete, are they able to come up on our screens in terms of the Zoom room aspect of it?
Yes, Representative Judkins and Stratton, can you hear us? Can start saying, "Are you there? Are you there?" There we go.
I'm walking in.
Okay, we'll see you in just a sec.
Is Representative Judkins in the Zoom room? Are we able to unmute?
Yeah, we've requested that she unmute.
She said it won't let me unmute working with the try again.
Kevin, come on up. We're waiting, so we appreciate it.
It was just patronizing one of our good Orem businesses.
Nice. Is it snowing very much outside yet? Is it snowing very much outside yet? Okay, good. Well, welcome.
Well, that's a powerful looking group of individuals right there. Grateful for the new members of our council and thank you. Congratulations, everyone.
Well, we appreciate you coming in on short notice. We've got Representative Judkins that's trying to join also. But in the meantime, Brandon, if you'd like to.
Yeah, so at your request, we wanted to invite those representatives that have a representation of districts that touch Orem and give them an opportunity to both express those items or subjects that are particularly important to them during this upcoming legislative session, and then also provide an opportunity for you to ask them any questions and or express any subjects that you feel are especially important to the city of Orem.
Okay, well, thank you, Bren. Kevin, maybe if you'd just like to give us, kind of a high level update of what your thoughts are on this upcoming session.
Thank you, Mayor and council members and Manager Bybee. I am very optimistic for the state of Utah and our, I think, now 253 cities and towns, 29 counties. As we're looking at the economic, the legislature has three primary stewardships. One is to care for the fiscal responsibilities, put together a budget, balance it, and make sure it works. Second would be oversight, the constitutional responsibility there. Then third is to set the policy. So maybe I could just talk about those three, and I hope Representative Jenkins and others that might be joined could add. But fiscally, one of the remarkable things about our state is for 16 years, we've been awarded as the most fiscally sound state, rich states, poor states. That's remarkable. And it really goes not, I think there's good policy that we have had through the generations, but it really goes to the values of the people, to be wise and provident in the way we live and the choices and decisions we make. And so that's a real compliment to the citizenry of our state. We do have a measure of what we would call budget surplus based on the forecast and what the revenues of coming in with the easing of interest rates and potentially those coming down a little bit, and the economic vitality that is Utah's one of the most diversified economies, as well as the strongest in our nation. We're blessed in many ways. So some of the priorities in that regard would be, we need to make sure we're properly funding education and our infrastructure needs, the programs of the state. There is one of the areas I chair in the legislature is our Federalism Commission, which deals with policy as well as federal funds and the risk there. And so I think we need to all be aware that the spending of our federal government is not sustainable, that we've seen the last 4 or 5 years. We need to be aware of that and recognize and be taking precautions and make sure we have plans for rainy day and things as they go. And that's one of the things that we've been able to do is really strengthen those emergency funds for our state. And so the budget will probably approach $24 billion this year. And federally, they're counting on spending $6.2 trillion and with revenues on $4.5 trillion. So that's a problem that we're continue to have. That I think generally the greatest risk we have as a state is some of the challenging policies that we're seeing at the federal level. There's a notion, Chris Stewart said, what we need is ferocious federalism. And that's, we hear the term federalism and yeah, well, the federal government should do everything, but that's not the meaning. There's just like we have independent cities and managing and directing, and there needs to be jurisdiction there for the cities with the state. That's the same with that vertical separation of powers, which goes in then to perhaps our greatest economic risk is our national debt, but we don't have that as a state, but the impact, and so we need to be prepared. So that would be that area. Policy-wise, I was able to hear, Representative, can you speak? Or can we hear you? Can you hear?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Oh, well, would you like to, is anything you want to say on the budget? Any in that sphere?
There are things I want to say, but it sounds like you were heading in a direction and I can speak after you. I don't want to
I was
interrupt.
just going over our constitutional stewardship of budget and fiscal and then oversight and then policy. Maybe I'll just share policy. There's been over 1,500 bills filed, which is not a joyful thing for me to hear. That's a record year. And I think we do well to try and restrain, but you have a lot of different needs. The interesting thing is we've not had the population that we have either at this time. And so there's a lot of our constituents that are wanting to see things and policies adjusted and changed and so forth. Wanting to do all we can again in relation, there's some pillars of priority that deal in different areas relating to making sure we're tempering the amount of regulation, that we're not interfering inappropriately with things that government shouldn't be involved in. Oversight, that's an ongoing relationship. We have several audits taking place right now. We asked for a legislative audit of our Attorney General. That was something that's in process. So that would be, in short, maybe that 50,000 foot level, Mayor and council members. The thing that I would say, I'm not here to tell you what my priorities are here. I want to hear what yours are. So most important to me is I want to hear what's on your mind, what concern, and that ongoing. So that's what's very most important for me.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. We appreciate that. And we'll have Representative Judkins, if you'd like to just give us your high level overview. And then I think from there, like Representative Stratton said, we'll just go to trying to let you know what's we're concerned about. So if you'd like to go ahead.
That's perfect. Yes, thank you. I am anxious to hear your concerns. When talking about the budget, say that there's been about $160 million set aside for a tax cut. We don't know quite what that's going to look like, but I just, sometimes lower taxes is always great, but sometimes it makes me nervous. I think we have enough money in the state budget, but then when we cut taxes, income taxes, there's a couple of things to consider because there's always opportunity costs, right? And I think that we need to be very careful how we prioritize what we are spending on. And the committees I serve on, they kind of inform my view. And I'm on social services and health and human services. And I like to see the money invested in families, and strengthening families, helping people with disabilities, helping those that have severe mental illness, things like that. And so I would like to see less spent on some of the things that I think government shouldn't be involved in. Like, I don't know if I should get so specific, but like we put a lot of money into the point, or we just put money places that I don't know that's exactly where I would prioritize our spending. Also, when we cut taxes, it can put more pressure on local governments and municipalities because we won't have as much money to share with our local governments, and that makes me nervous too. I hate seeing pressure put on property taxes and sales taxes, and so anyway, I just think we need to look at the entire conversation, and if we do it correctly, fantastic. And I hope that's what we do. Also, I just got a new committee assignment, and I will be on. Oh gosh, I should have wrote it down, but it's whatever you guys are. It's political subdivisions.
Political subdivisions.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that, and I want to work closely with you, and so I am interested in hearing about what your priorities are and what you would like to see, from us. So anyway, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Maybe I'll just throw out some of my concerns, and then we'll get that out there, and then different council members can kind of follow on that. As far as when I think about the legislature, it seems like in the last 10 years or so, especially, it's really changed with an emphasis towards real estate and real estate development. And it seems like that side of the equation has a much louder voice from the legislature than they ever had before. And so with that comes different bills, mandates that are kind of being pushed down on the cities. And I'm not telling you anything new, but every single city is different, and every city has different needs and has their own identity and who they are and what's important to them, and it varies drastically. And so my probably number one issue would just be that voice that's so strong on that development real estate side be kept in check and not overwhelm what we're supposed to be doing at the local levels. So that's my number one. Number two would just be any mandates that are put on the cities that are unfunded, where they tell you go do this and figure it out. I be concerned about that. And then I've always been amazed. I mean, I was amazed when, I think it was back when I first started paying attention, and there were like 400 bills passed, and I thought, oh my gosh, I look at bills as ways to control the citizenry. And so I saw 400 bills and I thought, oh my gosh, and now we're up to, where are we? I guess it doesn't matter. It's just a huge number. So I don't know. It would be important to me to see that we can focus our efforts on the bills that matter the most. But anyway, that's just me.
Maybe I could comment, and let's see if we can come up with some solutions. In 2010, there's an index. It's called the home prices relative to household income. In 2010, it was 3.2 times the median income. Now it's 6.2. So we have an issue. In that 13 years, we've doubled if the median income was 100,000, the average price home was 300,000. Now it's over 600. And so how do we deal with affordable housing? And I think we recognize, at least as your representative, I think Representative Judkins has done the same thing, is we realize that Orem, Provo, the areas I represent, maybe not so much Linden, but we are college towns, and there's a lot of rental units and so forth. And I think there's been an effort to hold harmless the cities in this area a little bit and recognize that. But I recognize the frustration, with unfunded mandates and affordable housing. And so what do we do with the, not in my backyard, but yeah, this is a problem. Homelessness is a problem, but how do we deal with that, at a macro level? And if there's, one thing that, one lever that I understand might be helpful is if a city, if we're going to do some higher density, but we can maybe put a requirement on that would require owner occupied. Maybe that's something that would be helpful. I don't know, but it's an issue that we're wrestling with. And so I hear you. I'm not texting on my phone. I'm taking notes. I don't have a piece of, unless someone's going to take notes and give them to me. That'd be great. But that's why I'm using my phone. So.
I feel like that is key, right? So it used to be you could buy a $500,000 home. Now it may be you're buying in order to get your foot in the door of homeownership. Now maybe it's to help these young families. It's a townhome, but it's owner occupied.
Yeah.
They have the opportunity to build that personal wealth through real estate. So I do appreciate you mentioning that.
That's the challenge. We have a whole fragment on our aging that are not able to develop that financial security and wealth because they're renting versus they're owning. And so that's a real challenge.
Yeah, because we always hear, I'm sorry, but we always hear where are our children and grandchildren going to live? And my response to that is, do you want your children and grandchildren renting? I mean, what do we want to leave as a legacy for them? And to me, it's an opportunity for that homeownership. And I appreciate your bringing that up and advocating for that.
So Marcia, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, and I appreciate all that's been said, and I would agree, and I do think it is a problem that hopefully we can work on together. But I feel like Representative Stratton, stated it very well. But I also I want to leave you with a little hope about the number of bills, because I know they're going up and up and up, but many of them are to give citizens more freedom, right? That a lot of times we look at the number of bills and we think, oh my gosh, these are just laws to crack down on people or something like that. A lot of them are just updating code. A lot of them are looking at how do we give more freedom to our citizens? How do we fix things in the past that maybe aren't so good and stuff like that? So I'm not saying they're all fantastic bills. I'm just saying that a lot of times you have to look at each bill individually, right? And I know that a lot of people look at that number and think, holy cow, what are they doing? But a lot of times it's just updating code and things like that. So just hopefully a little bit of hope for you that it's not all bad.
I appreciate that. Do we have any other
I
questions?
got a question.
Dave?
So good to see you, Kevin and Marcia. But my concern is, if we look at the BRT that goes up down University from the front runner, that was put in place, but now we have a bill, HB 462, that basically says you have a bus stop, you've got to have that density or plan a half a mile in radius. And I think that's not fair, because you have a bus stop now, they're putting in place, now you're penalized because we have a bus stop, and now you have to have density. With Orem being built out 95%, I really think that the legislature needs to look at those cities that don't have any density. I drove by Alpine, 0. So there has to be some kind of fairness that it brings equality to all the cities. So don't knock on the door of Orem. We have 45% high density or rentals, and they've got 2. I mean, there has to be a percentage or something that brings it back to fairness for the city of Orem. So that's my concern, is that we have the BRT down University, and now they're talking about maybe putting it down State Street, which that means you have a bus stop, you're going to have more density in Orem, and we don't need density on State Street in Orem. So that's my concern. Also, the legislature, don't take the power away from the cities, right? We represent the citizens, and we know what they want. So you need to give us our control back and not, push it down our throats. You talked about housing and growth. Affordable housing, that's a nice buzzword. But in reality, you got to have 4 factors. You got to have a contractor, a developer, FHA financing, some kind of subsidy that's going to make it work, right? So until you can get all those 4 together, and those contractors and developers need to know they don't want to make as much money because the subsidy will help in or kick in, that's the only way I can see it's going to be really affordable housing for people to be able to buy and have home ownership. So, and I don't know where you go from there. Is it a national subsidy or is it a state subsidy? I mean, I know Governor Cox gave a first-time buyer, but that's $20,000, but that doesn't really help on a $500,000 home. So I think if we're really serious about affordable housing, we need to have those 4 factors, and they all need to come together and make it happen. I guess that's my 2 cents.
And
So-
I'll add something to that concerns me about this HB 462 and the BRT spots that we have already in our city. It makes me feel targeted because the Parkway, University Parkway, is our retail center. And as those parking lots are seen as highest and best use of, high density apartments, that takes away our ability to keep taxes low in our city through our sales tax. So we're unique. We do need student housing. I'd like to really work with UVU to see if we can get more student housing on their property. I saw some wonderful things up at the University of Utah. I believe Ivory partnered with them with some brand new student housing there. So just that concern, to see if that is, our retail corridor is protected for our residents. And if we can find a way to help the student population find housing so they can go to school and have the full school experience down there at UVU.
So you jogged my memory on Orem, we have the mall and University Parkway. That is our economic engine. because we live on sales tax, right? So if we take away the commercial and put high density, we're going to defeat our economic engine, and we're going to have to cut budgets and people will lose jobs. So I think in all fairness, we need to make sure that each city is so different. They're all not the same. So I think this HB 462 was more like one size fits all. And it's just we're wiping the brush one big stroke. And I think as a legislature, you need to defend and make sure that you're doing it. You're acting on our best interests, because I know there's a lot of developers and contractors in the legislature that, don't think that that's right, and they can just push it down our throat. And I think we need to push back, because we want to keep Orem Family City USA. And if not, we're going to have high density all up and down State Street. And I think our traffic and congestion is horrendous as it is now, and it's only going to get worse. So there's my 2 cents, I guess, and a little bit of LaNae's.
So what are you seeing in the legislature, Marcia and Kevin, along those lines, those concerns that we have, would be my question.
Well, I know that there is a lot going into housing. We haven't talked about high density as much. I mean, until we get to the session, it's hard unless somebody shares a bill with us. Most bills aren't right out there, right? So if there's something coming up that is going to affect you like that, I haven't heard of it. However, maybe Kevin has. But another thing I want to point out is that this kind of dialogue is really helpful. And I receive texts. I try to contact people. I know I've contacted the city manager on different bills, because unless you're on a committee that's heard that bill, a lot of times you don't know the finer points of it, and you read through it and it's long and you're trying to figure it out. Contacting lobbyists, but it's a pace thing from you before, right? Like on something, and get your perspective and point of view. I feel like, I don't know, Kevin, maybe you have something different, or.
Well, I was hoping that maybe you could have an opt-out type thing, right? Instead of everything you're automatically in, let's opt out. If we don't really want to do 462, we won't. You can have the BRT down university.
Like something coming up this session to have an opt-out?
Or maybe change 462. Maybe you can do an amendment to 462 and just make it a little more fair. I don't know.
Well, and just to clarify, fair, I mean, where we're concerned is, Orem is about around between 40 and 43, 44% rentals. And so there's a point at which your city changes, the entire complexion of your city changes as you get more and more rentals. And we don't know what that percentage is, but we know we're knocking on the door of it. And so if we're, as a city, forced to go in this omnibus bill that affects everybody the same, and wherever you've got a BRT station or like over by UVU, where you've got that station, if we have to go high density in those areas and we're just forced to by like everyone else, then do we go from 43% rentals to 50% rentals after we do that? Anyway, it's just got to be, and what Dave's saying is, why not apply that specifically to different cities? And I mean, you have one bill, and a lot of those cities that he's talking about, the ones who have no density, they don't have a BRT station. So this doesn't even apply to them, period. So anyway, it's just, I don't know, we're trying to keep the nature of our city. We're trying to keep this Family City USA. We're trying to keep it from tipping over the edge into a lot more density and a lot more rentals. And we just need the legislature's help.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, there's an interesting, you know what, 29,000 acres, would 29,000 acres help? We had 21,000 more acres. Do you know that in Utah County, there's 29,000 acres inside the cities of Utah County that are federally controlled public lands?
I didn't know that, no.
And you look at the housing affordability issue. It is a function of available property and price of land and so forth. Of course, you have to have the infrastructure there. But that's just an interesting aspect. The challenge that we're dealing with is, you look at, in theory, the theory would be, to Councilman Spencer's notion of, if we're going to spend a lot of money on creating hubs, and the cost of having those spots, it would make sense in theory to encourage higher density there that would then diminish the traffic congestion that we just talked about and other things. That's the theory, right?
Right.
But sometimes in theory, one size fits all is a tremendous failure. So, I want you to know, I hear what you're saying. My segue in to the whole remark was that these are the challenges, and we recognize that Orem and Provo, for example, have lifted their weight in this sphere. And that's reflected actually in the legislation that's ultimately passed. To be quite honest, the first time I heard about 462 was about 15 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago. I don't even know who the sponsor is. I haven't heard of it. I'm imagine that's okay.
I think
It's not an issue not to hear it at this point. It's not an issue. I would assume that you had the League of Cities and Towns here a minute ago, and they probably briefed you on that. Is that what I wasn't here? I didn't hear the briefing.
It was a
but I
major
would
point
assume.
during our election.
Excuse
'cause
me?
It was,
462, I think, was like 2 years ago, or when was it?
You're
was-
not. I thought you were talking about 462 in the 2024 legislative session. You're going back to.
I was going back.
2022
Oh.
is when it was passed. It has been tweaked, and really the concern, when it started out, it didn't seem like a big thing because it seemed like exactly what you're saying, higher density around the front runner stations. But then the last minute, they added the BRT stations, which really targeted only Orem and Provo because we were the cities that had the BRT. So that's why it just seemed like it was just thrust upon us without a lot of citizen and city council engagement and feedback being given there. So that's why I'm
I'm
glad
sorry.
to
Then
hear-
I misspoke. I thought you were talking about
Yeah,
the 2020. Did you? That was I. So we're talking about dealing with the 2022 session 462. Is that correct?
Right, and our understanding was it was to the front runner, a half a mile radius, but now we're getting told that now it's all the stations up in University that you have to have that
How
kind
are
of
you
density.
being told by the? How's that communication?
That's what our
coming?
city's showing maps. We have circles all around the bus stop.
Is that the council? Is that the?
And MAG is moving forward on that.
It's in the legislation that requires it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we need to look at that and tweak it or something because we're doing.
Well, my point is that the segue into that is there is a lot of legislation that we need to be aware of coming in. And as you look at issues like that, I would recommend that you say this is problematic for us and notify your representatives. I mean, the theory is good, sound, but there needs to be some offsetting, certainly some offsetting safety valves that we're talking about. And I think that's entirely reasonable. It's
Yeah,
not,
no-
I don't see it as an issue. So,
Yeah, and-
just articulate it and communicate it and we'll go to work on it.
Okay. And so that is what we're talking about, is that bill from a couple of years ago that changed the whole dynamic of density assigned from the legislature in the cities. And, and
So that
and
was
going
what
back-
Council Member Spencer was talking about, ramming it down our throats. Is that the ram down your throat one
Yes.
we're talking
Yeah,
about?
I mean, the bottom line was, it was like, hey, it's a great thing in front runner, you have the half mile, but then all of a sudden now it's encroached down University to every bus stop. And we have, how many do we have? 4?
3 or 4.
3 or 4? So we have to have density in that.
The only one it doesn't apply to is the UVU station because it only applies to a station that has dedicated lanes for BRT. So it would be the 3 on the Parkway.
So we got 3. Yeah. So, I mean, and that could change the whole, vision of University and Orem with.
So we would be okay, I understand what you're saying. We're replacing the commercial, which was at the time,
that's our
that went in under RDA funds, interestingly enough, how Orchard was a redevelopment need. But anyway, I remember when it used to be cherries and peaches. And
Sure.
stuff
Yeah,
along
peaches
there, which was
were-
nice.
So MAG is telling you that their interpretation of 462 is that you have to take out your commercial development around each of these bus stations and replace it with high density?
No, that we have to have a zoning overlay for high density. Am I saying this right? Which then makes that, I mean, really by ordinance, we just heard a presentation in our work meeting today that we will need to change our ordinances to allow those projects to just go through without being reviewed through a zoning change, without being reviewed through the city council in those areas. So they are essentially telling us, taking away our zoning authority, our land use authority. It's on the MAG checklist. I just attended a meeting back in December. So I don't,
Okay.
the question is that MAG's interpretation of the bill? That's my question really. And if so, let's see what we can do, if there's anything you can do to help those of us. I mean, really, it's Orem and Provo, those of us who have
Yeah.
these BRT stations. You know, because it is pretty much, when you look at these stops, these BRT stops, it's University Parkway. They actually even overlap because those stops are, the location of those stops and the proximity of those stops.
Well, let me ask, is there a sense of this council that you oppose that?
We absolutely oppose that.
Well, that's the mayor.
That is the mayor.
Is that everybody nodding? We oppose that?
Yeah.
Well, you are the legislative body of this city, and you have the authority and the duty to make that known. And certainly you've done it by talking to your two representatives, but I don't, and when things like this come up, it's important we have the dialogue and the perspective to properly advocate and represent. You're making a great argument that it's problematic if you're not unified, but if you're unified.
Yeah. Now, this was one of those bills that started very late and got going and got ahead of steam. And I mean, I was told the week before the bill passed that it wouldn't affect Orem significantly, and then got tweaked and changed and rammed through, and then magically now it is what it is, completely different than what we understood.
I understand.
Representative, would you recommend a different course, or does that sound like?
I think what you're asking too is that you're hoping that we can do something this session to change this bill. And I'm not sure how feasible that is. Kevin, I don't know what your load is, if you feel like you can do that. But I'm willing to, I mean, I'll meet with Mag with you and we can talk about it, because I don't feel like I know enough about this bill yet. And I completely understand why you would be opposed to this. I mean, I completely understand that.
I mean,
So
what is the, how do you, like, if a bill is HB 462, do you go to the author or the person that wrote it, or?
you could just go to any legislator, but it probably needs to be a bit more before the session, because at this point, it would be very hard to get a bill drafted in through, kind of a thing, and anybody can change anything. I could propose changes to this. Yeah.
The other bill that was the 2022 legislative session, HB 462. The other one that also needs to be reviewed is Senate Bill 174. That was the 2023 legislative session. And I think, Steve, did you want to speak to some of that?
Well, I just had a question, with regards to this bill that we were talking about and the stationary plans and so forth. I was just wondering if our representatives would find it helpful if we maybe took that language as it exists in the statute right now and basically showed you some red line changes of how we'd like that language to be amended.
Yes. And again, let me be clear. I think the first thing we need to do is make sure we have the proper interpretation, and maybe it can be solved there. If that was the mayor's understanding, it's likely that was my understanding as well. Through my time of service, I've tried to be sensitive to the realities and the uniqueness of Orem and Provo. Orem and Provo is different than Salem or Woodland, because of the college towns and what we've already done and where we are in our maturing and our development. And so there needs to be that. The one size fits all never works. And so the best thing you can do for your representatives is to take that language and say, you know, if we were king, we don't have kings, but if I was king and we want to be fair and I want to represent my council and the body, this would be good language. That's a very powerful tool. And candidly, there may be a piece of legislation coming through that we could, the subject matter consistency is there, and we can add that language and have that discussion. But I will ask, you know, I would invite you to resist doing that until we have clarification on this. That's what I would say. As a citizen, I'll take off my legislative hat. I would expect you to resist doing that if you're unified, doing that until we have further clarification. I'll put my legislative hat on and say I will support in getting that clarification and having that discussion, because it's really surprising when we have a discussion that common sense and good policy will prevail, you know, as we understand. So
Yeah, and we can get that clarification. And I actually would be kind of shocked if it's not the way that we think it is, because it's gone pretty far down the pike, but we can get that clarification. Should we?
let's look at the language. I mean, we need to look at, let's do it dually. It wasn't legislative intent to have you change your zoning and take out the commercial and put in high density. That was not the intent.
So to clarify that,
Yeah.
they're not
From
saying.
some of those
they're-
that
they're
may
not-
have voted for
But
it, let's say.
they're not saying take out existing commercial. They're saying in areas where there is a parking lot or whatever, that's where the high density would go. Ryan?
Yeah, our team's delved into this quite a bit, and Representative Stratton is correct. It does say if there's something, if the city doesn't want to do something, they don't have to. If there's something that makes sense at that location and we don't want to take out commercial, we don't have to. We just have to go through a process. We have to do a plan and see if there's an opportunity to do affordable housing or more housing. The challenge is it's a subjective process. What we submit gets reviewed by MAG, and if MAG doesn't like it, then that is where we run up against, possible resistance. So, for example, one of the stations is University Place. Our argument would be, we've already put density at University Place. Look at how much has been built. We have a brand new park across the street. We have the new Kimball Smith project coming that's mixed use. We don't have any vacant land around that station. So our efforts would be, hey, we've already done this. We have a station area plan before you made us do one. And that would be kind of our approach to that specific station. And then MAG would have to decide. And I believe, Mayor, you're on a committee with other mayors that has a final say on this, and you vote whether our plan is accepted or not.
Right.
Once it gets to your level. So there are some outs, but whether we'll actually get to that point or not remains to be seen.
Right. So my issue with that is, and I could be wrong, so please correct me, but the MAG process is my vote in the same room as all the other votes. So if I vote against and all these other mayors vote in favor of forcing Orem to put this optional zoning in place, I'm not controlling the land use of my city. Is that, you're shaking your head? Yes, Brian. Am I correct there?
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't have the final say as a city.
And that's the concern I think that we're trying to voice here is, please help us maintain our legislative land use authority. And we're open to assisting with the housing crisis, but let us be in the box that fits best for us. Let us look at the whole picture of our infrastructure, of our need, of our college town. As you said, Representative Stratton, thank you so much for recognizing those challenges. And I think that's, from what I'm seeing and hearing tonight, it's kind of like, thank you so much for letting us voice these concerns to you. And I'm very encouraged after this conversation with you and Representative Judkins. This sounds like we just need to communicate better with you all, and maybe pull MAG into those communications too.
Well, the Representative Judkins' point is so healthy to have the discussion, and generally it's a breakdown in the communication that creates that and the misunderstandings. But it sounds like if I'm interested. I want to get with your good counsel and staff managers and see how in the world did you delegate the authority of your zoning to this MAG organ, what is it, Mountain Land Associated Governments? How did that happen? If you've lost the authority, it's your own making, not yours, but there's been and so maybe we need to look at also amending that because you need to have that authority to have self-determination and meet the needs that you have as you address your constituency. I didn't know MAG had that authority to override this city council.
So bottom line, if I may summarize, sounds like you as representatives and I would imagine there's probably other representatives and senators that represent Orem. You'd be open to at least hearing out what potential unintended consequences we think may have come from HB 462 and SB 174 and potentially help us look into possible clarifications and or improving the implementation and application of those bills.
Well, yes, and I can see, I'll let Representative Judkins, but what I would say to that is sometimes you don't know the unintended consequences until they're arrived, so we need to, that needs to be ongoing. But again, I see two prongs. We need to look at the jurisdiction and authority of MAG itself and why that's the case, and also see what we can do to adjust 462, given what we know today. Yes.
Thank you.
Let's do it. That's why we're here.
You want another bill to add to those 15? Just kidding.
Only if it's one of the good ones that you talked about.
I don't even think there's
Just an
even be a
adjustment
need
to
for
the
another.
existing one.
No, that's-
I'm
Mayor, I
good.
want to thank these two representatives for their many years or a few years of service and in their final year of service for both of you in the House of Representatives, and perhaps other things will yet come of one or both of you, and we wish you well in the future. But it's been a privilege for Marcia, I think you've been in 5 or 6 years, and Kevin, I think a dozen years. So thank you
12
for
and a
your
half,
service, and I've had the opportunity to interact with both of you prior to those times. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, council member. It's an honor to serve. It is. And I think when we get in sometimes the details, we forget what a privilege and blessing the shoulders we stand on, the gifts from divine providence that we have to live where we live and be able to have the opportunity to stand up. But every generation, every moment needs good, sound minds and willing to be listen to one another. And I will tell you that I think having different perspectives is actually vital to the process to come up with the best solution. We've got to have them, but let's be respectful and dignified and honorable as we interact and allow enough humility that we don't have all the best answers. I know that's certainly not the case for me anywhere close to that. I sense that. And so I think thank you. Thank you so much.
Let me just throw out one quick thought too. As far as, a lot of what we hear about affordable housing is in these big projects that have a lot of density and all the rest. And there's a whole debate there if that's really affordable by the time, everybody's involved and the free market gets involved. But the one thing I've never really heard from the legislature is a conversation about renewal of neighborhoods and going into older neighborhoods that have kind of, lost their luster and the housing's, not as nice as it could be. But there's got to be something there that renewing those neighborhoods, if it had the same kind of push and impact from the legislature, could be a way for a city like Orem, where we're over 100 years old, to start coming back in, and that would be a way to create affordable housing and doing it in a meaningful way, and it wouldn't change the whole nature and dynamic of the city. So anyway, that's something that we've been talking about that we think could use some attention.
I just to add on to that, we do have as part of our affordable housing, investments there are home renewal grants. I think last year I can't, please don't quote me on this, but maybe it was 10 to $15 million. And the purpose is so that, for example, when someone who's lived in a house for a really long time, they're on a fixed income and the house is falling apart and it's going to be whatever, it's unlivable and someone's going to have to, anyway, they can go in and fix up that home. And I don't know, I can find out for you. If someone reminds me, please, I'll put it in my notes, but I can find out for you how those grants are applied or who can apply for them. I'm not sure. But I know that there is money out there for that very thing. And I'm not sure how much or how to get it.
Yeah. And that sounds great. So we'd like to get that information and then we'd like to have a broader conversation about just in a big picture, this is a possible solution path for, creating the affordability and while maintaining the nature of the city.
Keeping people in their homes in a safe place. So,
right.
As we talk about affordable housing and deal with these issues, I think we need to ask ourselves really how much can we appropriately do and maintain proper principles of the free market.
Right.
What is appropriate in that regard. And we have to be careful there. I think the a legislative perspective would say, how can we support a city and what they're doing with zoning and so forth to create an environment that encourages that. I don't think, would we want to find some money from someone else's pocket to then give 50,000, for example, just is it $50,000 each homeowner to spruce up their home and make it viable? I don't know that. I'm not even suggesting that you're suggesting that.
Right.
But that's where those unintended consequences and discussions can go. And how do we protect, the notion of taking ownership and being a wise steward and caring and maintaining and self-reliance and all those key aspects of.
So what I'm saying is definitely not that. And I understand the complexities of trying to come up with affordable housing in a market that's driven as a free market. I mean, it's almost impossible. But what I'm saying is all this push from the developers to do these big housing complexes and all this high density and all the impact they've got, pushing towards legislators to make that happen. If some of that impact could be pushed towards renewal of neighborhoods and maintaining, the consistency of a community. And so I don't know what the answer is.
Reallocation of brain trust and emphasis and energy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what the answer is. I just know there is an answer out there. As far as, and when I look at, we're 95% built out. So where does that take us? Well, that takes us to renewing our cities, where they need to be renewed to opt. And if we can help affordability in that process, then all the better. So I don't know the answer, but I'd just like to see some, rather than everything pushed towards, the high density models, have some push towards neighborhoods and homes and renewing those. So.
Can I ask a quick question, just because I'm curious? I'm wondering, when we talk about affordable housing, something that makes housing and housing developments less affordable are the HOAs. And a lot of HOAs are extremely aggressive. And I feel like they take away homeowners' property rights, actually, when they get into what kind of fences, what kind of trees, what kind of landscaping, what kind of everything like that. I don't know what I would love to hear, just super quick, because I know we're running out of time and I really appreciate all your time and I appreciate the dialogue. But what do you think about HOAs as creating less affordable housing?
Yeah, no, I think that's another piece of the puzzle. HOAs are like any other controlling entity. They can be good or they can be really, really bad, just depending on who's running them and who's in charge of them. But that's my take. But that is another piece of the puzzle. And it really is a puzzle if you're going to answer it.
I'll offer a thought on that if that's okay. I think that most HOAs that have those kinds of severe restrictions that you're talking about, whether it be architectural features, you know, a minimum size, things like that, they're going to tend to be the higher end, more expensive type developments, more expensive type homes, as opposed to the smaller, more affordable homes. The other thing about that is that, you know, people who live in those areas with those kind of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CCNRs, you know, people go into those knowing or having the opportunity to know that those restrictions are there. So they're voluntarily agreeing to it. And if ultimately later they don't like it or don't agree to it, typically the bylaws of an HOA will allow for rescission of those rules or modification of the rules. So they, you know, if the majority or a supermajority of the people who live within an HOA don't like those rules, they can vote to eliminate them essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to your question on affordability, that's where HOAs a lot of times can be a ticking time bomb. Somebody moves into an HOA, the roofs, you know, in the complex are needing to be replaced. There's the balconies are falling off. Who knows what's happening? And there's some huge liability, and the people moving in aren't aware of that, and so it's just a financial mess. But anyway. Yes, but I think it goes back to individual HOAs. So
The one plus I do see and that I have heard of, because I know what the mayor's talking about, these assessments when the association, the housing complex is in disrepair. So then you have these assessments that a new buyer could have inherited. But the one positive that I would like to figure out how to keep in an HOA is, like, I had a friend who they had 85% of their units had to be home owner occupied. There only 15% could be rented. If you wanted to rent yours, you had to get on a list, and as people dropped off, you would move up the list, and you would then have the opportunity to rent your unit. So that preserved the environment that people bought into, right? They bought into a community of homeowners in an effort to establish their home and their neighbors. And to me, that one seems doable. That one seems something that keeps the value of that development and helps it to appreciate. So that's my take on HOAs. All of these other restrictive things, I understand how that could be prohibitive.
okay, we probably better wrap up. Do we have any other questions or comments, Bren?
Mayor and council, I'll just say that, you know, it's difficult to get some of our state elected officials to take the time out of their busy schedules to meet with us, especially as they're preparing for a new legislative session. So big thanks to Representatives Judkins and Stratton for coming and meeting with us. It definitely is real evidence that they are genuinely interested in working with us and are genuinely open to our input and feedback.
Yeah, I agree with that and seconded enthusiastically. We really appreciate taking the time to listen.
Yeah. We appreciate your service. You're awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
Appreciate your service too. So
Enjoy your next 52 days, friends.
That's very kind. Well, we're in this together. I've always said that what it will impact me and my family most will be because I'm a citizen of Orem, will be what you do, not necessarily what I do with my colleagues. And so grateful for your willing service. I have 10 bullet points here that we've talked about, and I'll be grateful to work with council and manage, our Manager Bybee and Clark and Council Earl. You're well represented in that way, and each of you certainly as well, and see if we can make the inroads and do the things we need to do here to represent the needs of this city. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you both.
okay, thanks. Bye.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to move that we skip the closed door session and that we ask Mr. Earl to send us a client privilege information on a few legal issues.
Sure, happy to do that.
If I can get a second, then a vote first.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion passes. Well, I think that takes us to find my agenda. Where my
Yeah,
agenda go?
city can't manager items and then an adjournment.
Okay. Yes, Brent, do you have any city manager items?
Just one thing. I just want to publicly acknowledge that you as mayor and council during the retreat, you were super appreciative and complimentary of our staff. And so I just want to make that publicly known and express my thanks in particular to Tess Jones and our executive team and you for helping make sure that the retreat was super successful and frankly inspiring and motivating to me and to our staff and so thank you.
Thank you, Brent. We appreciate that. Would someone like to make a motion to
Tom, want me to?
I'll move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Aye.
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 Aye.